Hi everyone, it's Ray here from Women's Football Today, and I'm joined by Rob Mitchell, Brighouse Town manager, and Jude. I can't remember your full name, Jude. Morris
Jude's
King.
Fine, Morris King. Yeah.
Jude's fine. Guys, how you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. It's been a bit of a mad half hour, I think, with the Twitter's kind of exploded.
It's been a crazy hour, guys. Look, we set this show up yesterday, got a load of guests to come on, got a load of pre-recorded material, managers and players and fans. And that, in the last hours, pretty much tossed out of the window because we were here to discuss the new European Super League plans and how they might impact upon the women's game in this country and across Europe. And in the last hour, we've heard that Chelsea pulled out, Man City pulled out, I think Atletico pulled out, Barcelona pulled out. Everybody seems to be falling down, and it looks like Ed Woodward's resigned about 15, 20 minutes ago, apparently. We're just trying to keep abreast of what's going on because it's one of these fast-moving stories, trying to find out who's resigned, who's pulled out, who's coming back. And now I think the situation is we're going to try and see how they extricate themselves from the mess that they're in, these clubs, and find a way back into the fold. We still want to look at this from obviously a women's football slant. And what I'm proposing to do, I've got a few gremlins, I'll let you know. I might disappear now and again. But I've got the questions that we had up front. And I'm going to run through some of them, go through some comments, and because I think some of it is still important because I don't believe this is the last time this is going to happen. You know, we've had the Project Big Picture not so long ago. We've had threats in the past, but this is the first time we've had a threat that's included the women's game and changing that, and probably having the same clubs in the women's European Super League as the men's Women's Super League. And that would have involved possibly ditching teams like Olympique Lyonnais and Wolfsburg, which would have been, it was just a horrendous thought that the teams that won the Champions League, was it 9 times out of the last 10 years, would be unceremoniously dumped at the competition, which would probably effectively mean that they'd lose their best players and they'd be in an absolute mess. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start by bringing Josh in because I know he's waiting patiently in the background. He's got a question, so I'll bring Josh in and let him fire away. Hey, Josh, how you doing, mate?
Hi, how are you? Yeah, I'm okay. Just the question is just if the European Super League did come into the women's game, just how much do you think it would affect it?
Okay, who wants to start off with this?
I'll let you jump on that.
Thanks. A lot. I mean, Ray's just said there. If an hour ago we knew what most of the teams would have been, and the women's game, the teams don't always correlate. So Olympique Lyonnais, they're the biggest women's football club in Europe and potentially the world. And Wolfsburg, I think over the last 10 years, pretty much between them, Lyon, most of them have won the Women's Champions League. So if they weren't to appear in the European Super League, then, that's a real kick in the teeth. So it would have been absolutely huge. And I think it would be also, what would the repercussions be, certainly in this country, on the Women's Super League and the Championship, and then the whole pyramid. Sorry, I'm not quite. I hope you can't hear that in the background. But yeah, it could have been huge. I mean, we've already got pretty much a split WSL already with Manchester City, Chelsea, Arsenal, and you can kind of put United in that mix as well now. And potentially they could be kicked out of the Super League. It really concerns me for the whole women's pyramid there. But yeah, you couldn't do something like that without Lyon and Wolfsburg and Bayern. To be fair, Bayern have got a really strong team as well.
Keep going, Jude.
Keep going.
Sorry, guys, I've got a few gremlins today. Okay. My Wi-Fi's decided to. Let's get Robin. If I can do that.
Yeah, no, I think, do you know, when the news broke about the European Super League, obviously there was a lot of discontent, and rightly so, because obviously it was potentially putting football as we know it in jeopardy. And I think, do you know, I kind of feel like the women's side, it was a bit of an afterthought, a little bit of a piggyback, a little bit of a token gesture. So for me, I wasn't even looking at it as that, you know, obviously anything can happen. You've seen just in the last hour, you know, teams have started to pull out. But I do think it was an afterthought. I do think it was a token gesture. And as Jude alluded to, I think teams such as Bayern Munich, Wolfsburg, Lyon, who were the pillars of women's football for a long time. I mean, Bayern Munich have come through now, but Lyon in particular have invested heavily in their women's programme. For them to then to be cast aside would be an insult, not just to Lyon, not to French football, but to women's football in general. And it just sort of take away all the hard work that's been put in over the years. And I just feel that we can't allow that to happen as a community, as we were women's football. I think we need to stand up and stand tall. And I think fans, particularly in the men's game, have come and they've voiced their concerns. And I won't say they've got their way. They've got the right way. Teams pulling out left, right and centre, CEOs and chairmen resigning. That's not football for me. Football's for the working class. You know, it's built up from nothing, and we built it together as a community. And I think a few, in my opinion, greedy people have come in and decided that they're going to do what they want, a bit like a toy. And if they don't get their own way, they're going to spit the dummy out. So for me, I think it's a good thing that the teams have been dropping out now, particularly for men's football, but for women's football as well. You know, they're building something really good. The Championship, the Super League, and all the leagues that are below that. Hopefully there will be some sort of restructure moving forward, not to the extent where we're having an elite Super League where it's a closed sort of league where no one else can jump in and teams are going to suffer for that.
Thanks for that. Thanks for your question, Josh. I hope you have a good evening, mate.
No worries. Thank you. You'll see you later.
Hey, how do I say it? Gawa. How do I say it? Because you're a Northern Ireland fan.
Gawa.
I don't know what it means.
Yeah.
But I'm a big fan of Northern Ireland after the last 2 weeks. So
good luck to you guys tomorrow night in the big game as well.
No, cheers, mate. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, the only Super League we want to talk about.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Josh.
Absolutely. See you later. Bye.
Yeah.
Right. So what we're going to do, I'm going to bring in a mate of mine who's going to just give you his thoughts.
Obviously, the plans about the European Super League and a breakaway for potentially for women's football. What has been your reaction and your response to that?
Well, I think there's been a lot of reaction to it. And not all of it necessarily good, but I think for us, no one knows at the moment what that looks like, particularly in the women's game. So. Ultimately, I'm a coach. I'm a football coach, and my job is to make sure that players maintain their focus for games and for tomorrow's game. But we'll see what happens in the future. I trust the club. We trust the club to make the right decisions. We're not part of making those decisions, but our focus right now is the game tomorrow, and all of the other stuff. I'm sure once we get more information, we'll be able to give more of an answer.
So that was Gareth Taylor at the press conference. Obviously, it's been a little bit unfair on the managers who've had to come out and I won't say take the flak, but answer questions that maybe they're not really, they're not really clued up. We saw Pep Guardiola as well today say he doesn't know enough of the details, and he gave his best stab at it. What I'll try and do, obviously, we get a lot of pre-recorded videos sent through. And I put them stacked up, ready to go out. And I'd like to try and play some of them, just one or two, just to see if. And I still think it's important because, as I said earlier, I think they'll come back at some point. And this is the first time they looked at the women's game, but I think they'll come back, and it just seems like they're trying to take, as I said earlier, with the project big picture now. Bring the women's game into it. When would they bring Sabutio and say we want to control that? I don't know. It looks like they're trying to control everything, because I was looking at this and I thought they can see that the women's game is developing, and all these clubs that got involved, some of them had only been going a short space of time, like Real Madrid have only been going, I think it's a year or two, Man United only 3 years, and others have only been going a short period of time. So I know I've frozen, you can just see me audio. I will try and put a little video in from a player that you might recognise. Let's just hope it works, guys. Apologies for the gremlins.
So I'm not really too sure what WSL teams would be invited or would participate in the European Super League. But I guess my question is, would participation of WSL teams in this league be detrimental to the competitiveness of the WSL in England? There's already a massive divide, really, between the top teams in the WSL and everyone else. So would this, them participating in this European Super League, just make that divide bigger and reduce the entertainment and the competitiveness of the WSL?
Recognise that. That's I'm gonna have to get a name right. Becky Gompertz, and I think we can maybe rephrase it a little bit, but we have got that uncompetitiveness in the Women's Super League right now. You know, as Judah said, we've got 4 teams at the top, and then the rest. You know, you've got a couple that are not far away. You know, we've got Everton there, and Reading have finished usually in the top 6 in the last few seasons, and then you've got some that are miles off, who are you know, fighting relegation and generally getting thrashed. And then you've got the Championship, which obviously there's less money, the quality isn't the same, and then you've got the pyramid below. If you then pump a few clubs with a lot more money, isn't that just going to make it even more difficult for teams to come up from the Championship to the Women's Super League and compete? I'll give that to Rob first.
Yeah, I think we spoke about this last week, didn't we, on your previous show about the financial backing required to compete, and I think it would. I think the bigger teams, the more financially successful, shall we say, teams would monopolise the league a little bit, like what's happened in the past. You know, in the Premier League, through the Premier League era of Man United, Arsenal. Then Chelsea came in, then obviously Man City. But I think in men's football, it's a little bit more of a playing field, so to speak. And I think the level of quality has gone up. But I think in women's football, it's still very much developing and has been developing, and it's improved so much. You've always got those. It was top 3, Man City, Chelsea and Arsenal. And then Man United have sort of come to the party a little bit, invested heavily in their women's team. And then, as you mentioned, the likes of Everton, Reading, you know, they're always there or thereabouts. And then the teams below, Tottenham, you know, they're close, but you've got teams at the bottom still. And I think Carla Ward's done a brilliant job at Birmingham as well, stabilising that team and making them really hard and gritty and, you know, difficult to beat on a shoestring budget. So, you know, credit to her. And I think the coaches, you know, and the players that they have, you know, can go a long way to improving the quality they've got. But ultimately, it always comes down to finances, because if you've got a bigger budget, you can afford more players, you can afford bigger wages, which means you attract better players, and that's a fact. And yeah, I do think that the levels will increase if massive amounts of money were pumped into, say, let's say the top 4 or 5 teams. I do fear that other teams will be left behind, and fans of those teams that are having the money pumped in might think that it's a great thing and they're winning every week and winning the title, but you want competitiveness as well. You don't want to be turning up to a game and beating someone 10-0. You know, it happens from time to time in the FA Cup. It does, because that's how it is. You know, it happens in men's football as well. It happens sometimes. But I don't think that should be happening in your league, and particularly not as regular as it does do. And I think the gap is closing slightly. As you say, there's always a top half and a bottom half, and you can kind of write down who's going to finish where at the start of the season, for me.
Yeah. Well, I'll ask Jude. I mean, do you like winning 6, 7, 8 every week, and then, you know, you have a couple of tough, you know, let's say last season and this season, it's between City and Chelsea, and it's same as last season. Whoever wins that game probably wins the league. Is that Does that satisfy you?
Well, you're never going to say you don't like winning. You know, you'd be a liar if you said you didn't like winning. You know, you follow your team, and obviously you want them to win. But I agree. I agree with Rob. You know, there's obviously, you know, huge differences in the budgets across the women's team, and at the moment it's not sustainable for women's teams to really break out on their own, and maintain the level that some of the teams are operating at in the WSL. You know, we've already seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, you might know better than myself, Rob, but I think it was Huddersfield Town were entitled to be promoted up to the Championship, I think, or certainly up to the next tier, and they've said, well, we can't afford it. Yeah, you know, we can't afford to do it, and that's really sad. The fact that, you know, from merit, they absolutely deserve to go up, but financially they can't. And I know the other Super League is kind of crumbling around our ears, but you know, that it was a little bit similar in the fact that, you know, you end up in one of these Super Leagues, and you're not there. You know, doesn't matter whether you win or whether you lose, you're there. You can't get relegated. And the WSL used to be like that a long time ago. You know, there was no relegation because I think there was probably such a big gap between the WSL and then the tiers below. But, you know, it's great to see that that's improving. But there needs to be more investment happening. And people will look at the clubs, you know, some of the top clubs, you know, they're coming out and saying, you know, like Arsenal, you know, we're seeing in the week that coming out that they have concerns over the quality of the facilities that they have as well. So, you know, if you roll down the pyramid, you know, some teams must be really struggling. I'm looking forward to seeing Leicester coming up because Leicester obviously really invested. They've gone pretty much pro, and then coming up into the WSL. But I think also what I like about the WSL is it is still fairly competitive. You know, look at Brighton. They've beaten Chelsea this year. They've held City to a draw. You know, they're really going. Whereas you look at maybe some of the other teams, maybe like the league in France, you know, it's outside of Lyon and PSG. That's it. You know, they basically win every games every week, and it depends upon who wins the Lyon PSG derby as to who wins the league. You know, we've got a lot. It's a lot more competitive, and it gives people the opportunity to aspire as well. You know, you see kids coming through, whether it's from teams further down the pyramid, and they can aspire. They're starting to see more games on the telly. You know, that visibility and the accessibility is there. There's a long way to go, but you know, it's all achievable if you want it.
Yeah. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in Rob. He's here now. Here we go. How you doing, Rob? You okay?
It's been quite a 24 hours, hasn't it, for all fans involved in football. I just want to also place on record this afternoon how proud I am of the other Chelsea fans that went out and publicly protested against the European Super League, and also kudos to. I'm not going to applaud the clubs for you know, signing up to it, and I will not applaud them, but I will applaud the fans of all clubs involved for openly making their feelings clear. This has been hopefully a lesson to a lot of owners that the English game is not to be trifled with and the world game is not to be trifled with. Competition is important. We do not want an Americanization. And hopefully, you know, we will see ramifications in the next couple of days that remind clubs why they cannot just go ahead and do this themselves. I have to say also, I think, you know, the entire thing was short-sighted from minute one, and certainly I was particularly angry at the way women's teams were just given a 2-line in the statement. It just absolutely appalled me, considering that a number of the sides involved. I mean, let's face it, Liverpool have almost publicly disavowed their women's team, which is incredibly sad. And a lot of that comes from FSG again, the owners. And a lot of the, I think it would be fair to say if you were going to have some sort of Super League, for want of a better state, you'd have Lyon and Wolfsburg in it, because they are the creme de la creme. And without that, there's absolutely no point. This was just an attempt to stab fans in the back for greed, and I'm glad that at the moment it looks like it's halted its tracks.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously don't know if there's going to be any ramifications on the men's side of things. So it's too much down the conjecture route. But if there is any ramification on the men's side, it would be extremely unfair if the women's clubs got hammered as well because of the men's. Just because of Chelsea's men's team doing something, or Liverpool's men's team doing, or City's men's team going down the Man United, that the women's team suffer. So I mean, I'm hoping whatever happens to the men's team, it doesn't affect the women's team, because that's just totally unfair.
Yes. Yes, I completely agree. I will support, and I said this publicly, I will support any sanctions placed on any of the 12 clubs that were involved in it on the men's side. Every single one of them deserve to face sanctions. They should not be sanctions that affect the fans, but sanctions that affect them from an operational perspective, whether it's transfer bans, some form of fine, or even removal from European competition, whether it's this year or next year. I will support that. On the women's side, I will vehemently protest any of that, because none of the women's teams, I think, wanted to be involved in it. I saw Emma Hayes' press conference today, and she clearly was as much in the dark about us. I saw Gareth Taylor's quotes, and it's a similar situation. I imagine for those two teams, considering the gravitas of tomorrow's match, it was a completely unnecessary sideshow, and I can only hope that when it comes down to it, the right thing is done with the women's teams, and they are not penalised because of the greed of owners, because ultimately it's not representative.
Yeah. And here's a question for everybody. It's more on the men's side, but how, if you want to punish the men's teams, how can you punish them without punishing the players, the managers, the staff, and the fans? What can you do? Anybody can answer that. What do you think you can do that is a punishment? If you said, well, we're going to ban the owners from coming to games, well, that's not going to make any difference to Stan Kroenke and Sheikh Mansour, for instance, and John Henry hardly goes. So can you think of any sufficient sanction?
I would support a unilateral transfer ban for all sides for the summer window. We know that this window, a lot of them intend to spend a lot of money, especially where they're the teams that are cash rich and intend to take advantage of a COVID market. I would do that. I would consider a points deduction, because even though it isn't the players' faults, ultimately the owners represent the clubs, and it would do good for if there was a big points deduction and we had to spend a year seeing all of these top six outside of European football. It will teach them a lesson and remind them that it's there to be earned. My final one, I would also sort of personally would endorse, would be. And again, the government-led inquiry, I would like that to lead to the 50+1 rule being sort of instated, and if necessary, action being taken to remove owners that, quite frankly, have no interest in their sides purely from a financial perspective. I will openly speak out. I say FSG have shown in the last 24 and 48 hours they have absolutely no regard for what Liverpool Football Club stands for. They have absolutely no regard and understanding what it stands for. And the fact that you got to a point this afternoon where you heard the grandson of Bill Shankly saying that he wanted the Shankly statue removed, when we consider everything that Bill Shankly has done for Liverpool, the fact that was the situation, it should speak volumes. And I sincerely hope that the owners, if they have any shred of morals left in them, where they are the owners, where they're clearly not wanted, I'm going to say with Mr. Mansour and Mr. Abramovich here, I think they both are different situations. I think they didn't necessarily want to sign up to it. They should not be forgiven, and I'm not going to say that at all. But I think ultimately they've proven that their fans and the club's interests are at heart. In the Glazers' case, in FSG's case, in Stan Kroenke's case, and in Daniel Levy's case, I find it very hard to make that argument.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to come in on that and say if there's any punishment that they think is deserved and relevant?
It's a real tough one, isn't it? Because it's not the players' fault, it's not the fans' fault. It's really hard. I mean, potentially the transfer ban. But it's points deductions. You kind of think that's going. Everything else is going to impact players. And we've seen things come out. Obviously, James Milner after the Liverpool game last night. They didn't have a clue. Clearly not happy. We've seen Pep today talking about it. it's really hard. But I agree with Ray in the fact that, you know, the women's one was, it's very much a throwaway comment to you know, oh yeah, this will make it better. We're showing we're doing our bit for the women's game, and it's clearly a lot further down. You know, there's been absolutely no consultation, I think, with some of the clubs. You know, they haven't even been involved with that. But yeah, it's hard. I don't know what the right answer is, but something has to be done. You know, we can't keep doing this. You know, we've seen, like I said, like Big Picture and now this farce. Yeah, I'm not sure what the right answer is, but there needs to be something done.
Okay. I mean, what I'll do is, I think we'll start winding down, because obviously the whole intention of this Super League is fair. But I'm going to a question from Paul. I don't want you to feel that we're ignoring him, because he just wants to concentrate on the Super League. But he said that Sue Campbell had said at the England game that the full Women's Super League sustainability is 2 TV deals away, and I'm not exactly sure, you know, whether that's like 2 deals of 24 million, or will the next one be 50 million? Will the next one be 100 million after that? At what level? I'll bring in Robin first on this. At what level of financial input in the top 2 leagues will help them to be sustainable? And at some point, we've got to discuss what goes into the other leagues below that, you know, in the Women's National League, because as far as I can see, there's not a lot of money investment comes from centrally to the Women's National League. So yes, it's great to have that sustainability, as Paul says, in the Women's Super League. But do you have that at the level where they're getting, you know, let's say £2 million per club? Championship are getting 300,000, and the National League are getting nothing, because, as we've discussed before, it just means that divide is greater and greater.
I mean, how low do you go? Because I'm sure there are teams in Tier 5 who are probably saying, what about us? And below that as well. And everyone's playing for the same reason, you know, for the love of the game, to try and be competitive, to win competitions. And it would be difficult for me to comment without knowing the financial implications at a Super League club. I don't know what it costs operationally to run a Super League club, how much players are on, what it costs for an away game, what it costs for a home game. So it wouldn't be fair for me to comment on that. But from a financial point of view, I think you pay for quality at the end of the day. And I think rightly so, the higher up you go, the more money they get, because there's more demand for it, supporters, tickets, shirts, merchandise, whatever. I think from a TV deal, is that sustainable? How long is it going to last? Because you could say that we're going to get a 2-year TV deal. Oh, that's brilliant. You know, all the Super League teams are going to get X amount of money. The Championship are going to get X amount. Even the National League are going to get X amount of money. After 2 years, what happens then? And what's the plan? How are you going to look? The TV deal might end. You might decide we don't want to continue with this, and then you find the clubs then having to operate above their means, and that's when you get the problem and the knock-on effect. And I think sustainability has to come from within the club, and I think it has to be built over time. And you look at the team, we've got the 2 guests here now from Manchester City and Chelsea, and massive clubs, global brands with unbelievable backing, excellent owners. I know we're talking about they were going to join a European Super League, so that's sort of put it into perspective, but I think they've always supported their women's team really well. You can't deny that. Like budgets, I know we mentioned facilities. I spend a lot of time at the Man City Academy campus, and the women use the same facilities, and I'm sure it's the same for Chelsea at Cobham. You know, that's how it is. So you can't knock them for that. I think from a financial point of view, if we turn around one day and an owner decides that they don't want to fund it anymore, or there isn't a TV deal there, or there isn't something in place, what's going to happen to these clubs? It's going to go pop. So you need to make sure that you're structurally sound and you are sustainable, and you're not relying on income. And any income that comes in is in addition to what you require, which then allows you to grow from the bottom up. Your academies, can you try and produce more players, better quality players, which then in turn will increase the quality of your national team, which is what we all want to see. We all want to see, England Lionesses winning a World Cup. That's what we want to see, you know, from grassroots all the way up to the professional games. So I think from a financial point of view, we just need to make sure it's sustainable and we're not just solely relying on TV deals and being short-sighted on we need money and we need money now. It's got to be a gradual development as it always has been. Otherwise, we're going to be in a really tricky situation.
Yeah, you can boom and bust if you get a good 2 or 3 year deal, and then the following one drops by 50%. Well, you can't suddenly tell your players that we're going to pay you half the money we were paying you before, because I don't think that they'll buy that. Paul mentions a point about a salary cap, and I don't think you can have a salary cap as in per player. I think you could try and do something like the Super League idea was trying to do, where the salary cap is 55% of your term. So legally, you can't just say, like we used to have in the old days in football, where there's a salary cap in the men's game, and it might have been whatever it might have been, you know, 500 quid a week. You can't do that, but you can have a limit to what a club can spend. I think we're going to wind this down. Because obviously there's no, it looks like there's no European Super League. But I just want to ask everybody how relieved they are that it looks like this is dead after 2 days, and what are they looking forward to for the rest of the season. I'll bring Jude in first for that.
Well, I think it's not over until we've seen everybody withdraw. And unless there's been more happening over whilst we've been on the air, but we certainly want to see that, because potentially it could still happen, but with fewer clubs, you know, so the problem doesn't go away. With regards to the rest of the season, I'm going to put this Super League stuff behind me, and my immediate now is tomorrow night, Wednesday night, Manchester City versus Chelsea in the Women's Super League. Huge game. Absolutely huge game. You know, Chelsea are 2 points ahead of City. You know, everybody says whoever wins this will win the league. You know, so yeah, bring it on 6 o'clock tomorrow night.
I'll bring in Rob. Let Rob have his say as well.
There's one Super League that matters, and that is the Women's Super League. I'm also, you know, I'll echo the thoughts. I think tomorrow night should be a cracker. I think ultimately both sides will agree whoever ends up triumphing on the night will probably go on and win the league, and they will win it on merit, which is better than last year when it was stopped due to COVID. From a other perspective, I'm looking forward to seeing how Chelsea do match up against Bayern on Sunday in the UEFA Champions League, and also how the men do against Real Madrid next week. That should be an interesting battle, considering Florentina Perez. In general, I'll also put out that I'm looking forward to the FA Cup final, because I think it's the best competition in the world, and I think it's the greatest club cup competition in the world. So I'm looking forward to all of that, and hopefully, once the dust settles, fans will be able to forgive their clubs but not forget this. That is how I will. That's my big takeaway.
Absolutely. I forgot you got all these games still to play, all these competitions, Rob. I'm going to bring Jude back in for a second.
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, it's the Team GB. It's the draw for the Olympics football tomorrow. Obviously, the men don't take part, but Team GB have a squad still to be announced. But the draw for that is at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning on the FIFA website, I think it is. So yeah, looking forward to seeing how that lines up, and then also who gets selected for Team GB. You know,
that's for another video. That
I want to do. It's a squad of 18 with 3 or 4 reserves. So yeah, a tough job for Higuerisa to.
I think when we'll do a stream with a few guests, and we'll do her job for her in 30 or 40 minutes. We'll do it for her. We'll pick those 11. I'll bring in Rob Mitchell as well to finish us off.
Yeah, obviously our season's finished now, so we're on with friendly. So I'm just looking forward to watching some games in the Super League, you know, in the men's game, Champions League. Really looking forward to that, hoping that the English teams can make it an all-English final as well in the men's competition, and hopefully Chelsea women can win the Women's Champions League as well. That'd be brilliant for English football. You're saying that, Jude, but English all the way. I did watch. I watched the Chelsea game in the Champions League, and I thought they were exceptional. I thought they were cut above Wolfsburg, which was good to see because Wolfsburg, as we said before, same as Lyon, have dominated for years, and I thought Chelsea were fantastic. I thought the way they managed the game as well was brilliant, and hopefully, like I say, they can go on and win it. And I know, obviously, Man City won't want that because they want to win it first, but and Arsenal probably won't want that as well as probably Chelsea. I don't know if I'm right in saying they'd probably become the first team to win both the men's and women's competition. Is that right? Yeah,
First English
I
club.
believe so. Yes.
Yeah, first English club. Yeah, so I mean, obviously, there is that as well. But no, obviously, I want Chelsea to do really well, and I want Man City to do really well. But I want both teams to have a good game tomorrow, and may the best team win. No controversy. Just make sure it's a good game. Best team wins, and then whoever wins it goes on to clinch the title.
Yeah, so much to play for especially Chelsea. I mean, I've kind of forgotten that they got so many competitions: Champions League, FA Cup, League. You got to give us something, Rob. You can't keep it all or get all for yourself. But I think if you let us win the men's Champions League, and I think we'll be happy with that. We'll be happy with that, guys. I got to say, always it's a big thanks to Rob Mitchell, Rob Pratley, and Jude for coming on today. We had some gremlins. They kind of sorted themselves out, and also the whole idea of the show kind of disappeared in the hour before we got going. But I've got to say thanks for coming on, and it's always nice to chat with you guys. Always enjoy it, and we will get a few people on. As Paul is wanting us to do that. Team GB 18, and we'll do that in the next week or two. We'll do that. So thanks a lot, guys, and have very good evenings and enjoy your football this week.
Cheers,
Thank
guys.
you.